To 8 o'clock. I'm glad you're still here with us on Morning at NTV. Time now for the Kickstarter discussion, and we are looking at the economy called Uganda this morning on the 9th day of December 2024. The conversation comes on the backdrop of trends, developments over the last month in Uganda that have, well, bordered on shocking, but also for some who have been around for a long time in this country called Uganda, very little is surprising. Now, those two variables are what we need to interrogate. Should we be surprised at the goings on, especially, for example, at the central bank and in the political space, or must we resign to the fact that this is the latest in a series of audacious actions by those who hold positions of responsibility and ought to perform those particular responsibilities with all the integrity that is required of them? I have with me in studio Francis Muhire, he's an economist, and I also have Bernard Cankara, an economist. I'm also joined online by Richard Ssempala, who is in Japan, and we shall be speaking to Richard Ssempala on Zoom. As soon as I get the cue that he is available, we shall of course engage. But allow me begin with the guests here in the studio. Good morning, Bernard and Francis.
Good morning, Chris. Good morning, Chris.
We are going to attempt to discuss and share insight and perspective on the goings on in Uganda right now. And this conversation is particularly primed on events last week that we saw the Bank of Uganda apparently clarifying on the incident that saw payment of money that was to the tune of around 60 trillion Uganda shillings, billion rather. I was completely going to get some people riled. But the whole issue is about the conduct of the Bank of Uganda in this particular crisis. First and foremost, what's your take on what's happening? And when that news came through that payments were apparently diverted, how did you read into this particular news? Let me begin with Francis Muhire. You haven't been with us for a while.
Thank you, Chris, and good morning to our dear viewers. Well, first of all, it was really heartbreaking, especially when the first news broke out that there has been haste, crime had penetrated, the central bank's, system. So it was really heartbreaking, and it was viral, both local and internationally. And, when you see something like this happening, as a concerned citizen, you have to really get worried. That if this can happen to a central bank, we've been seeing it with commercial banks, now it has gone to the central bank.
Yeah.
So seeing this kind of picture going viral, internationally, this is, very bad for the economy. You have, investors who are like, okay, something like this can happen to the central bank. So, but, while we were there waiting for, more details about this, because the government was really very slow to react, until the central bank actually came and said that, wait, it's not that our, IT or security was compromised, but rather we got orders. We as a paying entity, we followed the orders and made these payments. For me, the disappointing part from the central bank was that they didn't actually clarify who made the orders. Bernard, I might know where the orders are coming from, Ministry of Finance, but a common Ugandan out there will not understand. So, but that tells you that the central bank was, the officials were trying to be very careful. They don't want to paint this picture that we got orders from, let's say, Ministry of Finance or from the government itself, State House, because now we have almost 2 parallel governments. So that tells you that we are not operating under normal conditions, and this should be worrying. So I think the central bank should really come out to the common Ugandan out there, tell them, we got orders, and for us, we did our part. Then Ministry of Finance, or if there is any other entity under the government, should come out clearly and tell Ugandans what really happened.
Okay.
At least we deserve that.
We deserve that, no doubt. Shortly, I'll return to you, especially with regard to the question of our debt payment protocols. How do we pay debt, and to who do we pay debt? Because the idea, for example, that you know you're supposed to pay the World Bank, but in the process you pay somebody else, is a damning assessment of your own ability to stay on top of matters, even if technology is something that you could be struggling onboarding with. And that is something that paints a very bad picture on the Bank of Uganda. Bernard Cankara, you are maybe as dismayed as anybody else would be, but are you surprised?
No, I am not surprised. Chris, in 2016, I think Global Cyber Security Capacity Center did a study in Uganda, tried to assess the capacity of Uganda as a country to respond to some of these issues when they emerge, especially cyber crime. And they did come out categorically in that report that Uganda don't have the infrastructure to respond to cyber security. So I am not in any way surprised, because this report came in 2016. We are being hit in 2024. This is almost 8 years down the road. And that speaks to us the competencies within government as a country. Because when you have a situation like this, first, we don't even have the response mechanism. Uganda has, we are rated among the countries with the weakest response mechanism, not in terms of infrastructure, but also the ability to investigate some of these issues and come to its logical conclusion. So for me, I am not surprised. This demonstrates weak governance system that we have in this country, and this is also in line with the issues that we've been demanding government to respond. For example, you have a country where the Governor Bank of Uganda, the Governor Bank of Uganda has been out of office. We have not had a Governor Bank of Uganda for the last 3 years. This is very rare. It usually happens for economies that are at war.
I do not know an economy that is at peacetime.
You can go to Venezuela, and there was a time Venezuela didn't have a Governor Bank of Uganda.
But the chaos there was understandable.
Yes, because of civil war. You can go to Somalia between, I think, 1991 to 2010. They didn't have a Governor Bank of Uganda. You can go to Libya during the reign of, at the time when Muammar Gaddafi was getting out of power.
It was an absolute.
So you can trace this line, and you can tell that the cases where an economy has not had a Governor Bank of Uganda is when the economy is at war. So then I can ask the President of Uganda, are we at war, His Excellency? Because why?
If we are to help him respond, we are not.
Yes. Why are we not having the Governor Bank of Uganda? That is one case. So I am not surprised that we are getting hit with this. I think we don't have the infrastructure. And by the way, Chris, the funny bit about this is that we have the Ministry of ICT, okay? We have a Ministry of ICT, and all they are focused on is social media. Who has said what, which kid has said what, where. TikTok, I see they're jailing TikTok people, they're going all over, they're focusing on social media. But the critical issues which Uganda should get concerned are issues like the cyber security. We're in the revolution of AI.
That is right.
How are we responding to these things? So I am literally not surprised, but I think this is a wake-up call to our economy and the people that are making these decisions to put.
Okay, you introduced something that I would like to stay with you very shortly before I pose the question of our debt payment protocols to Francis Muhire. The aspect of the public relations handling of this by the Bank of Uganda was, or rather borders on damning assessment of the inside workings. The fact that the scandal was brought to light by the Daily Monitor, and this is almost 2 months after it happened, and then the bank takes another 10+ days to respond and chooses to use the occasion of the release of a monetary policy statement to also comment on this, meaning it was actually not ready to use that to take an opportunity to brief or address the nation on this particular issue, and that the monetary policy statement ritual came in handy. I think as a journalist, that is a little bit off for me. I don't know whether it is for you, but isn't that taking the country for granted? That I will talk to you when I want to talk to you. It doesn't matter the gravity of the crisis at hand.
The level of accountability among our public servants, it's something we are aware of. We know that the level of accountability is extremely low. And so people do not take the public offices they hold as it is that they should be actually very accountable to the citizens of this country. And that is why when each time we get into these issues, you see that the public servants don't take that extra level of accountability that we deserve as citizens of this country. And that is really quite unfortunate. But two things. Before
you do that, I hope you keep steady on that train of thought. We have with us Mr. Richard Ssempala, the economist, who is joining us on Zoom. He's been with us for the last 3 minutes or so. I would like to bring him on board very quickly so that we can get the context, especially that which has the MUFG, that is Japan's leading lender by assets, if the reports are anything to go by. This is a bank that operates in arguably the second largest economy in the world. Its ability to let through transactions that are suspect and does not at any one point in time attribute any of it to a hacking incident is quite damning. And well, for us, the uninitiated into banking infrastructure or even architecture, school us into that.
Yeah,
Mr. Ssempala, did you hear me?
Yeah, well, thanks so much for this. I want to thank you for the opportunity. I'm Richard Ssempala, I'm based here at Osaka Metropolitan University. Well, I'll speak to this incident that happened where money were really taken away. Yeah. Possibly I will take you back to some of these incidences that has happened for some time. Yeah, we have countries like Russia, Gambia, and so many others which have faced this same problem, where hackers enter into the system of central banks and then sometimes they take money, or otherwise they take important information, that is data. But for me, the delay, and then good Bank of Uganda came up and gave an explanation. As you've mentioned, colleague, that maybe they delayed. But for me, I will look at it in terms of the push we are really working on to have financial inclusion. That where we are working hard to see that people start using really financial institutions, and then you hear that this happened to our Bank of Uganda and sometimes came late to explain to the nation, then that I think negates the efforts that should be put in place to ensure that people are really financially inclusive. So my take in this is that possibly Bank of Uganda needed to come out well, explain to Ugandans about this. We know that one of its role is to oversee payments, international payments, and in this payment for debt, it was one of its mandate. So taking away, for example, the blame that for us, we just made the payment, so really doesn't really add up, because we sure know that the Bank of Uganda, among its mandate, is to oversee the payment of oversee payments.
That is right. All right, thank you very much for that preamble. We shall be returning to you very shortly, but allow me just do the follow-up on that question. You say, or rather the issue you talk about, the fact that Bank of Uganda oversees these payments, and that pushes me to the question that I wanted to put to Francis Muhire. The debt payment protocols for the country. I won't at any one time even indicate that I have an idea what the Bank of Uganda ought to do in case they are instructed to pay a certain debt on my behalf as a taxpayer. That is the mandate, and they have the skill set and the knowledge to do exactly that. And it was stated explicitly that this money was meant for debt payments. Now, away from the PR that you can, for example, mistake a debt payment transaction for any pedestrian payment, that you do not ensure that you stay vigilant on who is pressing which button on a computer and inputting which account to divert. Where does the diversion occur here? If the Bank of Uganda knows it's paying World Bank and it's been instructed, but somehow there is a diversion, the technology that is available, I know people are very smart, no doubt. Why is it that most of the other debt payments have not suffered diversions the way this has been explained, that a diversion can actually occur?
So, Chris, one thing we are now sure of is that money has happened with the central bank. And also what is clear that this was not a crime, a cyber crime. As we said, the system, BOU systems were not compromised. What happened was the money heist, which was actually facilitated by key players. In this case, the central bank is not being open about these key players, but we know that under normal conditions, debt payment or repayment protocols, the government through the central bank, one of the main roles for the central bank is actually to operate as a payment, organ for the government.
That's right.
So it does this when it gets instructions from the government through the Ministry of Finance. So the central bank, the deputy governor, is not being open. Please, sir, you got orders from, whether it is the minister, whether it is a junior minister from Ministry of Finance, you got the orders and you just made these payments without doing due diligence. Because if you're going to pay debt, repayment to World Bank, then why should it be going to another, should company in London, in Japan? It doesn't really take that much to do due diligence. So even ask Ministry of Finance or wherever you're getting these instructions from, on the list of the, creditors, we don't have these shoddy companies.
That is right.
You get. But I want to tell you that we should look at the picture behind all this. First of all, as you've put it, this incident happened months ago. If Delamont had not come out, we wouldn't be knowing. We saw how the government took long to react, even with the partial, picture to the public. So this tells you that, as he put it, we have an issue to do with weak governance. That is for sure. Even giving accountability to the public is a problem. So for me, I'm really worried that this could be one of the known heists we've come to know about. Probably there could be more that we are not aware of, because you see the government is actually not willing to come and give full details. So for me, I really get worried. And this takes me to the issue of not having the central bank governor. No wonder the deputy governor is really trying to be very careful with his communication. Because
the man is constrained beyond measure.
Yes, and I can, if you put yourself in his shoes, then you can try to understand. The man is being careful to the extent that he cannot even say that I got these instructions from Ministry of Finance or whether it is State House, because the Constitution is very clear. The central bank doesn't just get orders or instructions from anyone, except if it is the Ministry of Finance,
right,
operating on behalf of the government. So this tells you that something is not right. It could be even more than what we are able to see, what has been,
this particular scandal came just 3 weeks ago. We had another scandal that was revealed within the bank. A certain gentleman made off with old notes that were meant for destruction. Now, the whole idea around that scandal was that Ugandans shouldn't actually mind because these notes were up for destruction. And that is the word play and the tendency to take Ugandans for granted. If somebody can, within the system, go against protocol, and then we are expected to understand on account of the fact that these notes were up for destruction, so why should we mind? Fundamentally, protocol has been, breached, and that should be the issue. But that was also swept under the carpet, and we were told, well, there are better things to attend to as a country. Do you think, and this one is a general question, Michael Atingego has the responsibility as the deputy governor to state explicitly whether he is constrained and cannot do the job, or he has to wait for the appointing authority? We all want jobs. We want to be able to provide for our families. But as an economist of stature, doesn't he have that? Can't he say things are not as they ought to work? I think I'm constrained to do this job. Am I being too hard on him?
No, you're not. You're absolutely within your right. The authority to govern a bank rests with the Bank of Uganda. In the event that we don't have the Governor Bank of Uganda, then the deputy can deputize on that role. And in this case, we have Article acting as the deputy governor. So he has the authority, but he also doesn't have the authority. He has the authority, the fact that
interesting.
He has the authority, the fact that he's acting.
Yeah.
So then, by the virtue of the fact that you are the acting person, you should be accountable and give us clear detail of what exactly happened. He doesn't have the authority, because when you mess up, then you're actually in a big problem, because you cannot just say anything. And you remember, this particular issue has a big implication on Uganda's economy. Okay? We are at a time when you don't have a Governor Bank of Uganda for 3 years. When you make certain wild statements, or rather maybe sometimes you can even be too explanatory, then you can actually sway off, and that have huge implication on our investment, on our financial, fiscal policy, discipline, and a lot of things that comes with statements and his that has happened. And so I know within his own right he's trying to be fair enough and try to not raise the risk level high in a way that can scare off investors and can probably plug the country into a certain unplanned inflation or something like that. But he still has a responsibility. Chris, I think maybe you journalists will help us one day. The biggest problem in this country is that people that are on an acting positions, acting capacity, everywhere. Today it is Bank of Uganda, but if you go to any office, any public office, there you find somebody at an acting capacity. The person, in one way or another, does not want to be held accountable. So I don't know whether it is sort of a syndicate within the public service that people are appointed on acting basis, and
in order to facilitate
crime. Yes. If you go to even local government and you find acting maybe cow, or if you go to a local sub-county and you find acting CDO,
there is a lot of issues that is happening there.
So I think public service, within its own wisdom, all right, perhaps we should be interested the period which people are supposed to act in given offices.
Okay. Members of Parliament, I think, have a huge role to play there by determining for us what kind of time frame is required for certain positions to have acting heads, and the need to have a substantive head, that is in the event that the nation ought to move on very smoothly. The other day we were talking of the fact that if you are a father and you want some samosas from the shop, and you send your little boy, and then your little boy finds somebody along the way who knows you, knows home, and knows the shopkeeper, and the boy decides that I think it's okay to give this money to the guy so that he can get Papa those samosas, and then the guy chooses to, well, not bring or pay the shopkeeper and takes that money elsewhere, is maybe to the guy who will supply cassava instead of samosas, and then you return. What do? The boy needs to be punished. It's all down to the fact that the bank can allow things to happen the way they are. Are the junior officers beginning to look at the situation and say, since there are so many loopholes, there is nobody watching, I think I can also take it on and steal something before the governor is appointed? We'll be right back. You're watching Morning at NTV. Welcome back. This is Morning at NTV, and we are inching very, very forward after the hour of 8 o'clock. The discussion on our Kickstarter this 9th day of December is Uganda's economy on the backdrop of the latest episode of haste. There are elements within the economic observers circles who are saying the central bank over the last few years has begun acting very much like the governing party, the National Resistance Movement, never really minding about execution of roles, who steals and who benefits and who should you go up to. Right now, as we speak, the position of a governor for Uganda's central bank must be one that does not enlist prestige in international circles. And even if one is appointed and goes to Washington to negotiate on our behalf, he will be a man who will be working in shadows. After all, a nation can survive without you. So who are you and what do you bring on board? That's a precedent that has been set. But allow me begin this segment of the discussion on account of the fact that the president himself has, in the last few years, or months rather, talked about the fact that government officials are colluding among themselves to steal and conduct hastes, many of which we do not have an idea, because the president, being the sole consumer of intelligence information, maybe knows a lot more than we do. The fact that he hasn't shared as sufficiently as he ought to is also a debate for another day. So could it be that in the process that we know that Ministry of Finance officials have been named in certain scandals, including allocation of funds for the budget, and have colluded with members of parliament, some of whom we've seen taken to remand, but are now out on bail? Is it that the cartels that are working within the government are now more brazen in how they conduct business because they know the loopholes are there and there is no one watching, and even the appointing authority does not care to actually ensure that some of these things are in check? In studio, I have with me Bernard Cankara. He's an economist and a policy analyst. I also have with me Francis Muhire, and on Zoom we are joined right from Japan by Richard Ssempala. Let me begin with Richard Ssempala. You spoke about the hacking incident and the fact that many economies have suffered this. Uganda alone is not very primed to be able to deal with some of these particular challenges. But this deputy governor was very categorical that this was not a hacking incident and that the IT infrastructure of the central bank is intact. Do you believe him? Mr. Ssempala?
Yes, please.
Did you hear and understand the question?
Yeah, please repeat the question, thanks.
You have stated that incidents of grave hacks have been conducted against governments, and that you did mention something about Russia and Gambia, and that this is something that we lack the capacity to deal with. But the central bank's deputy governor was very, very explicit in his statements. He said this is not a hacking incident and that the bank's IT infrastructure is intact. Do you believe him when he says so? Yeah,
well, as I mentioned earlier, that this takes us back to what is expected of Bank of Uganda one of the mandate is to oversee payments, including what they were doing, clearing our debt. And in there, they indicate that these transactions have to be fast and secure. So what we saw that the Bank of Uganda failed on, yes, they made the transaction, but possibly they didn't really take action to ensure that this is a secure transaction.
Wow.
And that's where we lost as a country. Yeah, I gave the examples of countries that have really suffered in that. Gambia was one of them, Russia, New Zealand, and so many others, including Bangladesh. So it's expected that, yes, before making these transactions, you need to be aware whether the transactions you are making are really reaching the third party you want to clear. Otherwise, the money is a cost to Ugandans. That is taxpayers' money. So as a person who's really in office, we expect that you need to do the best. So for me, I really don't buy the argument that was given because we expect that in your mandate that you need to make these transactions fast and, of course, secure.
All right. The Deputy Governor also expressed profound dismay at the fact that FG was not cooperating as readily as the other party in London. And he attempted to, well, I don't know whether that is the right conclusion to come to, attempting to put in a spot of bother Japan's biggest lender in terms of assets. I do not see a bank as big and, well, I don't know, with such a reputation, being required to state or explain something as simple as a transaction that has come in and it is legit.
Yeah, well, I think that takes us back to the workings of the financial institutions. Well, this is a global challenge that is facing many banks or financial institutions globally. So it requires concerted effort that each and every country needed to work together. I remember one of the submissions that was made by the President Christine of European Union, and then the former president of World Bank, head of World Bank, indicated that the risk that countries are having now is on financial risks. That if no efforts are done globally, we are likely to face these challenges. So for me, I would advise that we need to work together as many countries to see that the financial resources that are really transferred globally are secure. So Uganda needed to really work hard to invest much in cyber security and also working with other partners to ensure that these funds are secure, because we know that there are many organizations that are in this. It could be some, they have even different objectives. So right. If money is for hackers, sometimes they might need to maximize the richness or wealth they want to. But also we have the issue of terrorists. So it is really a concerted effort that needs to be undertaken by all countries to ensure that the financials that are really or are taken overseas are secure, so that really we can benefit out of that. Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Richard Ssempala, many thanks for that. I'll be returning to you shortly for your closing remarks on this matter, but allow me engage Francis Muhire and Bernard Cankara on this. What I hear from Francis Ssempala's submission is that we should cut some slack for the Bank of Uganda and the Deputy Governor for that matter. But the Deputy Governor and his statements fly in the face of us being required to cut some slack for him, because he says this is not a hacking incident and that IT infrastructure is pretty much intact. But according to Ssempala, the possibility that it's actually a hacking incident is, well, more than 90%. And that also poses a new dilemma in how we debate this particular issue. Should we take it that maybe it does completely, or rather it doesn't work for the Bank of Uganda to accept that it was a hacking incident, because that alone would state that the system is overly compromised and it wouldn't instill any confidence in any other person that is working with the central bank. What should we ask?
Well, I would also want to agree with the Deputy Governor that it wasn't actually the system that was hacked. So I want to...
So we stick to the haste.
Yeah, we need to stick to the haste and go back to what you've mentioned, that the president has been clear. And I think this is even common knowledge that, you know, you have bureaucrats colluding with each other, even to the extent of using even the international, you know, mafias or cartel. So you have both cartels within the country and colluding with even those ones outside the boundaries. So I think that's what we should be looking at. However, as you know, you asked, does the Deputy Governor has the power, the authority to, you know, to speak, you know, details of these issues? Well, he still remains the Deputy Governor. And as a country, we really need the governor. But the question is, if you can have the deputy, I mean the speaker, die and you replace him even before he's laid into the ground, and it is taking you over 3 years to replace the governor, and even there are no indication that you're going to replace the governor, that tells you that as a country, under this government, where our priorities are, you know, we are putting politics above economics. And once you do that, then you have everything wrong. You know, politics is very important, but has to move alongside economics. In fact, politics should be motivated by the economics. So we have to look at this as a haste. Personally, I'm really waiting. I can't wait for the government to come out with full details. That is, if we are lucky and the government actually gives these details. Because this could be an incident that came out, you know, to be known. But how many incidents have happened and we are not aware of them? You know, if you still have, you know, things like, you know, events like this happening, it should really worry you. So we really need the governor. The deputy governor is... It will
go a long way in realigning.
The deputy governor is constrained. It is very clear.
It's very clear.
Yes, and that's why he's being very careful, you know, to make his statements.
And that, of course, also means that he's failing, he could be failing to perform his role as a deputy governor. Well,
the central bank is supposed to be independent. That is for sure under normal conditions.
That is right.
And that would give the deputy governor powers to actually speak up. But we are talking about abnormal conditions. I'm trying to be fair to him, you know. But under normal conditions, he has all the powers. The central bank is supposed to be independent and transparent. But he knows the environment he's operating in. If you have local cartels who could be behind this haste, you know. Right. So he's trying to really be careful with his statements, but that should worry you as a Ugandan and any other Ugandan out there, that the central bank is no longer that transparent and independent.
As a layman, I'm beginning to think that maybe when the central bank is instructed to pay a certain individual and they actually begin the process, as he said, those processes are internal within the central bank, I think they should be able to go manual and call and ask these guys. We are going, to pay money.
No, the central bank has to follow up.
We are supposed to pay the money too.
Definitely. I mean, this is common sense. You don't just operate as a robot as Bank of Uganda. You need follow up, you know. As I've told you, the central bank is aware of the creditors. Not just getting instructions from the sources you're not even willing to give.
I mean, if you told me, for example, NMG, this is the whole scenario. Nation Media pays Chris Higenyi, and somehow the person who is instructing the payment to happen doesn't see Chris Higenyi at this end. He should be able to ask NMG, I thought this money was supposed to go to Chris Higenyi. Why is it going to Bernard Cankara?
Absolutely.
You see, Chris, this is just the same thing that has been happening before. Yeah, these are the same people that are occupying the same offices. They're just changing the methodology. Yeah. So what we see is just like Mr. Muhire said, the behavior of the cartels are changing. Yeah. And government and His Excellency the President, when he came out to fight corruption, he was using words, not infrastructures. Yeah. The budgets were cut, that's right, okay? A lot of stringent few efforts here and there within the Ministry of Finance, and of course scaring people, one or two people being picked and put behind bars here and there. But that does not remove a very entrenched cartel system that has operated in this country for years, okay? It has been here for years. So for us to be able to evolve and in a manner that we can fight off corruption and haste, like now that we are seeing the behavior of the cartels are evolving, then we must be very categorical, we must be very institutional in the way we approach it, and we also must be very thorough and full accountability, especially within the Ministry of Finance. These cartels are within the Ministry of Finance. And the
President has spoken about it.
And the sooner we get the names, at least let's have some names to start with.
That is right.
As a country. Let's have some names to start with. But the person who approved, who made the approval?
Knew what he was doing.
First of all, who even made the approval for that transaction to happen? Who authorized it? Who received it? What processes did he go to? Who are those ones who got involved directly with that processes of the money? Can we know them? Can they go and report to the CID and we know them? Because that is the old.
It's very convenient to say the CID and the other agencies are investigating the matter, and that we are expecting, or rather banking on the report of Uganda's police CID infrastructure to bring us up to speed with exactly what happened. We know the culture of reporting back to the taxpayer in this country, be it by a probe or an inquiry into the happenings at any one agency or even police investigations. I'm hoping that this time around maybe a new culture can be created where the guys who were responsible for initiating this transaction, the people who processed this transaction, can be brought to book. I do not want to talk about those who received, because at the end of the day, those ones are the smarter guys.
Even public servants resigning, for example, the deputy governor can actually hope to resign. That is one option to show accountability.
How many Ugandans have you seen are resigning?
This will be the first precedent.
I want to remind you, when you talk about the entities implicated in this whole case, I want to remind you a few months ago, a few years ago, the Minister of Finance, if you remember the issue of in Entebbe Airport, the deal gone wrong. One of the second worst known deals we've ever had under this government. And the minister came and said, he said, I didn't read the last page of the agreement where this term and condition was. And we moved on as Ugandans. So it's not part of us that people have to resign.
Do not throw the blame on Ugandans for moving on. Let's keep the blame on an individual who thinks that because they did not read the last part of an agreement, it is enough to let them off the hook. And even the appointing authority to listen to that and let that person continue to serve in office. It's complicity against the state, it's complicity against the citizens of the nation, right from the appointing authority, the implicated official. But what is more appalling is the audacity to come and tell Ugandans that I did not read the last part of a particular document. It is also the audacity for an official to come and explain something like this to us as though you are explaining to your 6-year-old who you need to simply settle anxiety and completely reroute, and then he continues to play again.
So that is the unfortunate reality we have in this country under this government.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to have to close this, but finally, I would have discussed the impact of all this on the economy, but one thing I know is that we are too small for these things to actually create an impact. For example, the markets are not rattled. They stayed, well, I don't know whether they stayed intact or they are even formidable enough to react to such sentiment. But you saw the release of the monetary policy statement, an occasion the deputy governor conveniently used in order to convey or respond and clarify to this particular matter. What do you make of his reading and assessment or update on the economy?
So the events that have happened, we are not going to see the impact in the short term. But I want to assure you that in the medium and long term, the effects are real. And one of the key impacts one might want to look at is foreign investments, especially those who are coming into the financial sector of this country. So in the short term, we may not see the consequences, but be assured of the long-term consequences. Generally, in terms of the macroeconomics of this country, a number of indicators seem to be looking well. If you look at inflation, we have about 2.9. Headline economic growth, we are also not doing badly. Yeah, but also you need to look at other indicators. The trade balance is still negative, massive at around $523 million. And not forgetting the debt stock, which stands today at about 94 trillion Ugandan shillings, jumping from 46 trillion shillings in 2019. So since 2019, we've been on a spree of debt acquiring. And yet, we see that, for instance, May this year, Moody's downgraded our credit rating from B2 to B3. Okay. Inciting that our debt repayment affordability and financing options is declining. Okay. So we are already addicted to debt, and yet IMF and other big financials are saying that there is limited fiscal space, space for Uganda.
All right, Francis Muhire, many thanks. Bernard Cankara will be coming to you very shortly. I would like to give a minute to Richard Ssempala, who is, of course, online with us, and ask the simple question: as you are studying at the Metropolitan University in Osaka, does this particular incident offer any opportunity for a case study in finance or high finance? Very quickly. Did you hear me, Mr. Ssempala?
Yeah, kindly come again, please.
I'm asking, as an economist and a scholar at the Metropolitan University, does this particular incident offer any chance of a case study?
Yeah, well, academia is all about this question is really that calm that might need to be answered. So the issue now of what happened with Bank of Uganda is, I think, is one of the issues that need to be really studied. Check what happened elsewhere and how those countries really have tried to address it.
Okay.
Yeah, I was checking with the banker. Sorry, for example, for US, it's upon the separate services to control the security of their US dollar. So possibly studies need to be undertaken to see that there is a joint, maybe operation between the our financial institutions and security organizations to ensure that, yes, the monies we send out are secure and can reach the intended objectives. Thanks a lot.
Very much, Mr. Richard Ssempala, economist, joining us from Japan. I would like to quickly ask Bernard Cankara to give us a wrap, and then maybe we can let the Deputy Governor give us that reassurance as we enter the final bend of Kickstarter.
For me, I would just let the governor or the Deputy Governor of Bank of Uganda know that Ugandans are aware. And Ugandans, when you speak to Ugandans, they listen, they also understand. And they try to understand in detail what exactly transpired. You are dealing with a literacy rate which is relatively high in this country. So when you speak in lay understanding, they will also be able to tell. And I think as it is now, the odds are against him. You can't run the Bank of Uganda just like a guy in Chikubu is running his business. Yeah, this is an institution that must be very fully accountable to Ugandans, and we need to know with the highest level of transparency possible what happens in this economy.
Okay, Bernard Cankara, economist, many thanks, and many thanks to you too, Francis Muhire, for the perspective and insight. I'll leave you with the statement from the Deputy Governor of the Bank of Uganda, Dr. Michael Atingego, as he clarified on these matters.